Hello and welcome back to Scouching. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different because the three players we're going to be profiling in this one video play on the same team, they've played on the same line pretty much all season long, and they're going to be inextricably linked for the duration of their career, as we all remember that these guys all came from pretty much the same playing situation in years in the future. And today we are going to be looking at the illustrious trio playing forward with Djurgården in Sweden, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Noah Östlund, and Öhgren. What also makes these players really interesting to compare and contrast at the same time is that they play wildly different playing styles that also really complement each other really nicely, which drives a lot of the success that they've had over the course of this season. So if there's anyone really interested in scouting work or watching young players play and seeing how lines might want to be constructed if you're ever going to be constructing a team in the future, these three guys playing together are a really interesting case study. So for the purposes of this video, this is going to work by going one at a time, starting from the player that I have ranked the lowest and ending with the player that I have ranked highest, and we're going to explain why and what makes these players special and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And as much as it pains me to do so, we are going to start with my boy, Noah Östlund. If I were to make a list of the flashiest and most exciting players in this year's draft, Noah Östlund is probably up near the top of that list. In the last 2 seasons, Östlund has been playing at the under 20 level in Sweden and has absolutely just shredded that league to pieces. With 57 points in 32 games over the last 2 seasons, and a brief period of time in the Swedish Hockey League playing pro hockey, Östlund topped off his really productive junior career with a spectacular under 18 performance, quarterbacking the Swedish team to a gold medal performance, putting up 10 points in the tournament to be among the leaders in scoring in the tournament. So just a note, if you want to see the data from this video, it won't be featured predominantly here. You can click the link in the description and go to the free Excel sheet to see all of the Scouching Report data archived there. So the first thing that sticks out to me about Noah Östlund is that his edges and turns are some of the quickest of any forward in this draft. He's able to navigate tight spaces, escape pressure really well, especially when he uses those turns, and combining that with what I think is extremely good anticipatory thinking, reading the play and putting himself in good position. And I caught him essentially daring opponents to make mistakes and cause turnovers in the offensive zone and the neutral zone. And when those turnovers are created, he shows really strong line-mate awareness to get pucks to safety and continue moving pucks up the ice. What I think really makes this player interesting is that opponents might try to rein him in or get inside his zone of influence, but he'll use really quick hands and those quick turns to evade that pressure, get a completely different look at the ice, and making those safe plays to maintain possession. I think all of these traits I've been talking about kind of all go together to really lead into what I think is a really strong pass percentage of 73% in my sample of his. I really like Östlund playing as a center because he's a player that I think really thrives with time and space to think. In various skating situations, I felt that he was just a rock solid skater, even generating speed in a straight line. And he just brings a natural pace to the game that I think catches most people's attention. And yes, you might look at Noah Östlund and think he's small and plays center and scores a lot of points, so he might not care that much about defense, but he has the foot speed and quickness to close gaps to puck carriers quickly and used it to have actually pretty strong defensive transition involvement. He sits 7th amongst forwards in involvement in terms of defensive transition, but he also shuts down all but 39% of them, which is really impressive for a player this size, chasing down play in the neutral zone as a center working up the middle of the ice. In all honesty, I do have Östlund ranked the lowest of the three, but he is probably of the three the one with, I think, the highest upside. The skill, the anticipation, the creativity, the finishing ability. He's got a lot of ingredients that go in here that could really work out for him. And he could be a really good example of what I call a glue player, where he's back-checking, supporting defensemen, receiving breakout passes, sending breakout passes to wingers in the neutral zone, or carrying pucks himself. Just a really good player to have in pretty much any range of the ice. And this was even true in the limited SHL sample that I saw, and I did track one game from his SHL time this year, and he didn't really look that out of place there. He's small and a little bit soft on his feet, but in terms of pace and quickness and using his adaptive thinking on the fly, You saw flashes of it. So why is he ranked lower than the other two? Well, in isolation, in individual clippable moments, yes, Noah Östlund shows premier quality talent in my opinion. But he really struggled to drive consistent 5-on-5 results. And that goes in pretty much every metric outside of his passing and defensive involvement rates. He finished just over 5 shot assists per 60 minutes, under 25% offensive transition involvement, just over 9 dangerous pass attempts, and less than 7 individual shot attempts per 60 with him on the ice. What led to these issues? Well, Östlund is small and slight on his feet and really just got removed from play a lot. So if Östlund has all this potential, then why is this happening? Honestly, I think a lot of it comes down to his size and lack of strength at this level, and all of these traits not really coming together all that often, and a lot of real inconsistent play out of Östlund driving play up the ice. In wide open ice, I caught him losing control of pucks when he shouldn't be. He had trouble settling pucks along the boards to get breakouts going. And along the boards, he could just really be removed from play too easily. He's got skill, agility, and evasion ability, but he really struggled to take that next step, consistently managing and engaging in pressure, especially at 5-on-5 when I saw him. Off puck, along the boards, he was pretty weak and bouncing off guys and really will need to build on his strength. And it really also goes to show that Djurgården, at pretty much every level that he played at, could not generate very much offense at 5-on-5 reliably. And part of that goes back to what I think is a bit of a poor defensive system or defensive intensity that really prevented them from turning the puck over a whole lot in the defensive end. So it really doesn't surprise me to see that NHL teams are a little hesitant when Östlund is bouncing off guys in the defensive end and he's a 5'10" center that plays with speed and skill and kind of struggles to drive play at 5-on-5. But what I don't think really goes noticed all that much is how much his quickness and agility can help him get to loose pucks quicker, and getting play going in the right direction when he played well was something that you really noted with him. It's just a matter of involvement and consistency here, but to me, showing the capability of doing so is really important, so I would be really interested to see where his game goes in this area moving forward. But all that being said, I can't help it. I love this guy, and I really want the best for him. Outside the first round, if he's available and you're willing to take a chance on him, I get the feeling that you will be rewarded. There's lots to like, especially if you take what's already really good right now, nurture it and develop it, and keep making him a special, skilled, offensive, agile, speedy center that has really good awareness of line mates. The way he dives in and out of rushing and passing lanes with pace and skill is really impressive and unlike a lot of players in this draft. More strength could do wonders to really just enable him to play offensively a little bit more than he does. And more of that resilience that strength could bring could make him a more devastating playmaker and play driver in the offensive end to drive much better offensive metrics at 5-on-5. As of the time of shooting this video, Östlund is 19th on my list. Would I take him there? I don't know. Maybe a little bit later would be when I feel safer about drafting him, because I do admit there might be risks that limit his NHL likelihood of playing, and I could see him being a player that peaks as a really good SHL player for his career. But boy, in isolated moments, there are some impressive plays that I've seen out of Östlund, and I really want to see more of that. And when put next to my tracked data at 5-on-5, it really perplexes you as to how this player could not have more success than he did. But it is also easy to see why scouts might be a little bit more hesitant than myself. The next player we're going to check out is Jonathan Lekkerimäki. Lekkerimäki is a player that has been under the eyes of a lot of people since putting up 12 goals in 8 under-18 games last season over in Sweden. And that goal scoring has certainly followed him into this season. In 26 games at the under-20 level, he scored 20 goals, which is not bad. He got called up to the SHL playing another 26 games and scored 7 goals, which is also not bad at all, not too shabby. And I like to focus in my tracking work on players playing at the highest levels that they play at over the course of the season if I can help it. So Jonathan Lekkerimäki's sample size has 5 SHL games. On top of that, there's an under 20 level game and a game tracked from the semifinals at the under 18 World Championships just not too long ago. And honestly, I still really don't know what I think of this player, to be perfectly honest with you. But what is clear to me is that Jonathan Lekkerimäki scores goals for a reason. He has one of the quickest releases in the entire draft this year. And that certainly came out across all levels I watched him play at this season. Pucks hit his stick and it does not take very long for him to even change angles and then get the puck off of his stick. And pre-shot skill and pre-shot motion is a really, really strong predictor of NHL goal scoring. Just taking pucks and shooting them on net from wherever you are on the ice isn't always the best option in the NHL, but if you can change angles and change the look the goalie has at the puck at the last second right before you release the puck, and you've got a quick release, to me, that makes you a much more threatening goal scorer, and Lekkerimäki has that already at this age. And in transition, there's actually a fair bit of skill that Lekkerimäki brings to drive pretty solid offensive transition results for an SHL player that I've tracked. He had an offensive controlled zone transition percentage of almost 65%, but that also improved significantly after his first 2 SHL games I tracked, where he maintained control on just 3 of 7 attempted offensive transitions. That also touches on a little point where Lekkerimäki didn't play all that much in the SHL, but still, it was really, really interesting to see him play at that level, even in limited minutes, and this was a trait that I felt he got a lot more comfortable with as the season went on. And early in the year, I felt that there was a concern with Lekkerimäki being used as a target or a carrier or even a passer in offensive transitions, because there was just a really extremely low offensive transition involvement rate, even when you looked at his game at the under 20 level that I tracked early in the year. But looking game by game, to me it's clear that he's settled into SHL pace, and once the new year rolled around, his team was using him a lot more as a transition target, with his last 4 games all passing 30% involvement, far surpassing his previous games, of which only 1 crossed 20%. However, to me, Lekkerimäki is a player that will need to work on generating speed and being more efficient in his stride, because he's got a solid pair of hands, but those 2 things need to combine to really make him a potential play driver on smaller ice, especially considering he isn't particularly large himself. But it will certainly help him get through offensive rushes at the SHL level if he does develop this speed a little bit more. And I also wouldn't categorize Lekkerimäki as potentially a strong defensive player at the end of the day. He had moderate success when he was involved in defensive transitions and was under 8% involvement in those transitions, so he wasn't really doing a whole lot, and he was kind of mediocre when he did, but he did get exposed a little bit when it came to battling for loose pucks and challenging puck carriers directly in transition. But when he does cause those turnovers, he can think quickly, read the ice, and get the puck to safety to a line mate streaking up the ice. And a little bit more development in his foot speed and quickness could really help him be a little bit more involved in defensive play, especially as a winger at the next level. But to me, Lekkerimäki still comes with a lot of uncertainty about his projection. He's an undersized shooter who, like a lot of other shooters I've tracked over the years, have really troubling trends in their data that might limit their upside as an offensive player at the next level, especially if they're going to focus on goal scoring. In the SHL, Jonathan Lekkerimäki put up a pretty respectable 10.6 shot attempts on his own per 60 minutes, but just 3 of his 8 attempts were dangerous. And across all 7 games I tracked, just 1 was high danger, and while it came from a high danger area, I didn't find it particularly threatening considering Lekkerimäki's reputation. So I would like to see Jonathan Lekkerimäki take a little bit more initiative, especially as a puck carrier, finding open space and utilizing it, having awareness of where that space is on the ice. Because as much of a goal scoring threat as he is when he's shooting the puck, he is going to need to get to more dangerous space to give him a better chance of actually getting the puck in the net, especially in offensive rush scenarios, and I think he's going to need to think about diversifying his scoring options to make him just not the threatening shooter from all over the ice, but a threatening goal scorer that can do it in a bunch of different ways. But before we move on to the next player, I don't want to make it sound like I'm too down on Jonathan Lekkerimäki. With more SHL experience, his data certainly improved in a lot of key areas. And some of the individual tools he has, I think, are pretty close to top of the class, if not tops. He's an improving offensive transition player and an excellent pure shooter, and you can work with that. And it does alleviate some of the concerns I have with a profile like this one. His passing work in my data was somewhat suboptimal, I would say, but it improved over the year. And even though the pass volume he put up was 52nd amongst forwards in my data set, over time he seemed to really cut down on the unnecessary turnovers and have better reads of the ice, making little simple passes here and there to maintain possession and get pucks to line mates. He's going to need to get stronger to win more battles along the boards and get breakouts going as a winger, but he's playing in the SHL as a 17-year-old. That's really hard to do. Personally, I've never done it, but I imagine it's pretty tough. And plays like the one I'm showing here are not really uncommon for players like this. If he can learn to generate speed and change directions in stride a little bit better than he does, and diversify his shooting and scoring game over time, I really think there's a lot to like with Lekkerimäki's upside here. And that goes even if he ends up as a middling 5-on-5 offensive player that you put out on most power plays as a shooting threat, if his strength doesn't come as far as you want, or the pass vision doesn't really develop to a point where he can really quarterback NHL rushes. And finally, we get to Liam Öhgren. Now, Liam Öhgren is a player that I had not seen that much or heard that much about coming into this season. But he ended up the highest ranked of the three, and I believe it'll stay that way for me, because I feel like all 32 NHL teams would love to have players like Liam Öhgren on their team, and it's blatantly obvious to see why at such a young age, and to me that carries value. Of the three, I feel like Öhgren brings the best feel for the high-end hockey game. He's not pushing things beyond his control, he's not pushing pace too much or not playing with enough pace, and he has the problem-solving skills and adaptability to really just make things work at high levels of play. His straight line speed is solid, and he can push defenders onto their heels in a straight line if he likes. He can draw pressure in, making himself a target, getting pucks to line mates as well, showing strong awareness and willingness to use them. Even though his pass volumes were very, very low, it still did seem to me like this was a player who knew when to pass the puck and when to carry it, but when he was carrying it, he did have that speed to really drive results up the ice. Off puck, Öhgren uses fluid footwork and smooth pivots to drive really efficient speed generation, making himself a target, square to puck carriers, and that was a big, big reason why his offensive controlled zone transition percentage was over 80%, which, as I always say, a lot of players wish they could maintain control on 80% of offensive transitions, even the ones I'm profiling in this video. Another thing NHL teams I think will love is just his willingness to grind play down along the boards, get his hands dirty, try to fight to create loose pucks and create breakouts for himself, and he chases play down low really, really well and rarely gives up on play. Again, this is a player that might not be the best of the three if they all hit their ceiling, but he is going to be a guy that you just want on the ice. He may lack what I would consider elite top-end speed, even though he's pretty quick in his first couple of steps, but those quick first few steps and the strong awareness of line mates made him a really, really impressive, good hockey sense kind of threat all around the ice. That further led to strong offensive transition data, and it led to him finding space in the offensive zone and making himself a scoring threat once the puck gets to that area. I saw flashes of deception to bait opponents into one direction and pulling pucks in another, and it just gives him little pockets of space to play around with that I would really want to see more of out of him, to not just be this north-south grinder type. I think there's more room for growth in this area of the game for him, and I saw it a few times. And the data case for Öhgren is to me the best of the three. Even beyond the great offensive transition data that I've tracked on him over the course of this season, Öhgren factored into 50% of his team's shot attempts with him on the ice. In my under 20 sample alone, that number went up to 61%. His determination and skill allowed him to get to dangerous areas of the ice, and I would really like to see this brought to the SHL, where in my sample he failed to register a single dangerous shot attempt in my entire sample. He clearly showed that of the three, he is the most willing to get physically involved, and I'm sure that NHL teams will latch on to that. But funnily enough, Öhgren sits 77th of 84 when it comes to actually shutting down defensive transitions and closing out possession for the opponent. He allowed control on 70% of those transitions, which is bad, but there is more to the story that I think might make you feel a little better. Öhgren seems to kind of default to really reaching with his stick and kind of stop moving his feet right at the time where moving his feet might be the most important. With those weak stick checks, he removes himself as a threat, and bigger, stronger opponents and even smaller, faster opponents could just blow right through his pressure, which is very strange to me considering the intensity and determination that Öhgren brings naturally to the game. Luckily, to me, the fix is relatively simple. Get a bit stronger, but don't lose that quickness, and keep your feet moving to follow through on that pressure and really close out those breakouts as best you can. The same could be also said when play was locked on defensive zone cycles. Djurgården really struggled to generate offense of any kind amongst all three of these players at all levels I tracked. And in my view, a big factor in that was relatively soft defense from everyone on the ice, and from someone like Öhgren, that's not something that I would expect, so working on that and building on his intensity levels defensively and getting stronger should help make things a little bit better in this area. So to me, Öhgren brings the safest floor of the three and probably the simplest profile to analyze, especially if he gets stronger, but that doesn't mean he's any kind of slouch. I have this guy ranked really high for this year's NHL Draft. He's got a great north-south game. He grinds along the boards when he gets involved. He has really good finishing ability to top it all off at the end of a possession. He's got strong awareness of line mates that, while he had really low pass volumes, still made him a pretty reliable transition threat with really good volumes and really good efficiencies. And that goes double for the fact that 4 of my tracked games were at the SHL level and he still drove really good involvement and efficiency in transition. So the intensity level is something I think should interest NHL teams pretty much across the board, and if he starts to slip into later bits of the first round or so, you might be able to pick up a really useful NHL player later than you would think. So to close, these 3 players have played together for long stretches of this season, and for good reason. Djurgården had trouble driving consistent 5-on-5 results and didn't have a whole lot of depth on their junior team, but in my experience, they were absolutely led by this trio of players driving the bus all season long. In the SHL, all 3 of these players I thought showed flashes of their potential and showed varying levels of effectiveness at this age, but their team did end up getting relegated to Hockey Allsvenskan, where they will be playing second division pro hockey next season. But for all 3 of these guys, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. It's a lower level of adult competition, but it gives them a bit easier competition to develop against while still being grown adults, and it should give them ample time for coaches to be comfortable playing them for more minutes in a game. So I really hope that they do play those minutes, make the mistakes they need to make, learn from them, get better over the course of next season, hopefully earn promotion back to the SHL, and if any of these 3 players are back in that league after next season, I'll be very interested to see how this time next year in the Allsvenskan has benefited all 3 of them. If you want your most projectable, potential power forward with skill and finishing ability that is relatively safe, Liam Öhgren is probably your guy. If you want pure scoring with room for improvement elsewhere to make them a more dynamic offensive player, Lekkerimäki could be a really good pick as well. If you just want the highest upside potential play driver and don't really care that much about risk and really think your strength and conditioning team can work with this player, Noah Östlund is probably the best bet you can make, especially past a certain point in this draft. And the 3 of these players just complemented each other extremely well and should be an interesting case study for coaches. Öhgren was a bit of the muscle, the high-paced north-south game, freeing up pucks, making himself a scoring threat for his line mates. Östlund had high pace naturally to his game, really good puck management and skill to move pucks efficiently to line mates. And Lekkerimäki was just a brutally awesome scoring threat from all over the offensive zone over the course of this season, and certainly finished off his fair share of goals. So I'm a big fan of these 3 guys. I think they come with varying levels of risk and varying levels of upside and very wildly different styles of play, but I've really enjoyed watching all 3 of them, and I will certainly be very excited to see where they go in the draft and what their careers have in store. So that's it for this Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you can subscribe on Patreon or click join below to join the YouTube membership program. You'll get access to exclusive player cards, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects around the world, merchandise discounts, early access to videos, written reports, and plenty of other goodies, or you can pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and we'll see you in the next one.